On Business Incorporated today, Africa Finance Corporation expands its Asia footprint with $389 million Samurai loan facility. The United Nations signs a new cooperation framework with Ghana to provide the country with $500 million. And the EU grants Kenya 119.6 million Kenyan shillings for Ebola outbreak preparedness. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Willie Bung. Let's begin with the market, starting with Africa's, where sentiments are positive at intraday. The NGX was up strong at 0.48%, almost 0.5%, while South Africa traded at 0.39% higher today. Elsewhere, Egypt's EGX 30 was slightly higher by 0.08%, while Kenya closed Monday's session in the red. Now over to the Middle East. Major equities were trading in negative territory. The Abu Dhabi and Dubai indexes were both down at intraday 0.14% and 0.19% each. Similarly, Saudi Arabia and the Qatari indexes dipped 0.45% and 0.71% respectively. Now, in the EU, wage negotiations between Volkswagen and Germany's largest union begin today, with workers asking for a hefty 8% hike in pay. They say growing inflation has left them with few other options. Deutsche Welle's Stephen Beersley joins us from Berlin for the latest. Now, Stephen, an 8% pay hike, how likely is that?
Yeah, if you had asked me a year ago if a union would enter negotiations with a firm here in Germany asking for 8%, I would have said that's crazy. But in the meantime, we're seeing inflation here around 10%. So you can see where this is coming from. Also, there is still a labor shortage here across Europe and no signs that it's going to soften in the near term. And so you see that actually some of these unions have an advantage in many ways. And in fact, some unions have actually charged even harder into negotiations, asking for more than 8%. And the truth is they've actually had some success. If we look at Lufthansa, for example, Germany's flagship airline, we saw that they struck 2 deals with ground staff and with pilots earlier this year for pay increases, which in some cases saw certain employees receiving double-digit pay hikes. Now, that, of course, comes as Lufthansa was really trying to keep operations running and smooth during its important summer season. But it shows you that labor really has an advantage right now in this market.
So how are things looking for Volkswagen at the moment?
Well, Volkswagen's first half numbers were actually quite positive. It's upheld its year-long outlook. There were some questions about slightly falling revenue in the second quarter, and the results for the third quarter we'll receive tomorrow. But in general, it's signaled that all signs remain positive. As with many other car makers, it's actually been able to withstand some of the recent economic headwinds and some of the supply issues. Remember that with the war in Ukraine, there were a lot of supply issues hitting car makers in Europe because of production facilities in Russia, component production in Ukraine, for example, but that many car makers have been able to do well because they have relied more and more on certain luxury segments where the purchasers aren't as affected by economic setbacks as maybe in the mainstream market, and where profit margins are actually quite good. On top of that, Volkswagen recently had the very successful spin-off or IPO of Porsche, which provided it a huge funding boost, which it does need right now. Volkswagen, in the background of this negotiation with the union, I should say, is this overall transformation that Volkswagen is undergoing. It's turning into a company more focused on electric cars and more focused on digital platforms, which means that it has to invest heavily in things like software developers. All of that requires a lot of money, and so that's where Volkswagen is really at right now, is trying to secure its position, and that's in the background of these negotiations that we're seeing.
Good news for Volkswagen. So what are we expecting from the European markets today?
What we're seeing today is that European markets were generally up. In Frankfurt and in Paris, both were up on the backs of positive quarterly results from several companies in particular. SAP, the software maker out of Germany, beating quarterly expectations for the third quarter. The same with UBS, the Swiss bank. So that's inserted a bit of good news for investors today. Elsewhere in London, for example, FTSE 100 down on some negative results by the bank HSBC. It saw a fall fall in its revenue for the third quarter. So the quarterly revenues right now, quarterly reports really are driving markets today. Later in the week, we'll look at the meeting of the European Central Bank as they come together to discuss interest rates hikes and what they're going to do in the future. We should also mention something we're following here is wholesale gas prices on the very important European spot market. That's a Dutch facility out of Amsterdam. That is where companies have to go when their long-term deals are falling through, or when, for example, Russian gas falls through. They've been purchasing on that spot market. Prices have spiraled in recent months. Now they're finally down to below 100 euros a megawatt hour. That's actually huge for utilities. That's huge for end users, including businesses and consumers trying to heat their houses here. So that's a bit of positive news as we look at a mild fall so far here in Western Europe. We'll keep an eye on that as winter really sets in, but that is some of the good news that's rippling through markets today here in Europe.
Thanks, Stephen. We'll definitely keep track of the meeting with the central banks and the gas prices. Thank you so much. And now to the UK, where Rishi Sunak has emerged as the country's new Prime Minister, the third this year, and he has also given his first speech. And a key highlight was him saying that the UK is facing a profound economic crisis, and he has pledged to fix mistakes. Well, Juliana is standing by with more details on that. Good morning. Hi, Juliana, good afternoon. It's good to have you. Juliana, Rishi Sunak has given his first speech as Prime Minister. What do you think are his economic policies? How do you see them?
Yeah, that's a good question, a difficult one to answer at the moment, Will, because I think it's pretty fair to say that these are unpredictable times in the UK. I do have a little bit of his speech. I think it's worth reading. He says, "I will place economic stability and confidence at the heart of this government's agenda. This will mean difficult decisions to come, but you saw me during COVID doing everything to protect people. I promise you this, I will bring that same compassion." And it is going to be very difficult for Rishi Sunak, the wealthiest man in Parliament. Him and his family are worth £730 million to bring that compassion. And I think that was one of the key issues that turned him off, or turned Conservative Party members off during that summer campaign with Liz Truss, because he is so wealthy. And that is, unfortunately for him, his political Achilles heel as we are going to go into very difficult months, as the Prime Minister has stated, and all the data indicates we are almost certainly in a recession now. We are going to have official data from the Office for National Statistics, almost certainly indicating that when we get those next GDP data. We've got high inflation, double digits. We've had information this morning suggesting that those who are shopping, going for the most budgeted items like pasta, bread, fruit, they are paying 65% more today than they were last year, Will. 65%. That is a lot when you think of the headline inflation figure being 10.1%. Those on the lowest incomes are paying 65% more for basic food items. It is going to be a challenge for Rishi Sunak, but it's pretty interesting. In his statement, he did refer to his legacy in the pandemic, and anybody in the UK, any of our viewers can remember Eat Out to Help Out. We can remember the furlough scheme. That furlough scheme was a defining moment of his premiership in the Palace of Westminster. Will we be getting something very similar, or some sort of targeted support? I'm not sure, because of course the problem that Rishi Sunak is facing is that Liz Truss's unfunded tax cuts and her energy support scheme, which was to last for 2 years, spooked the markets. The markets didn't like that. They all had to be reversed. So when we get that fiscal statement on Halloween, Monday the 31st of October, his Chancellor, who has been confirmed as being Jeremy Hunt, he has got a very a delicate tightrope to balance, because on the one hand you've got to help people who are struggling. 65% is a shocking figure, but then on the other hand we saw the market turmoil. It's going to take years and years to come for Britain to finally get back its international financial credibility. So there's a lot to play with, but we'll just have to wait and see.
Juliana, being Prime Minister now in the UK seems like a very daunting task. I don't think I want to be in that shoes at this moment. It seems like any way you turn, it's
Not right now.
not a good foot. You have to put the right foot out there. If not, it's going to be a big problem, especially with what you said, 65% hike in food prices. That's a lot for UK, the Britons, to take in right now. It's really a lot, I can say. Now, talking about the food prices, I wonder how Rishi Sunak is going to handle this, because the Confederation of British Industry has said that he must avoid the doom loop of austerity cuts. Do you think this policy is unavoidable? You know, look at the current economic situation in the UK.
Well, it's totally unavoidable. It's not possible. And I think one of the things that held Rishi back during the summer hustings was the fact that he was saying, you know, we can't have these fantasy economics. And, you know, Trussonomics has failed. It's going to go down in history, you know. Economist students are going to study the spectacular fall of Liz Truss's government on that financial policy. It just didn't work, you know. What she tried to do is cut taxes to boost growth, and the markets reacted spectacularly. So there's no way that he is going to be able to start dishing out the money. Controversially, but it's important to mention that there has been some support for those on low and no incomes. One of them was the £650 energy support grant that was given to millions of families up and down this country in 2 instalments. We do at least have some sort of cap in place, though it was supposed to last 2 years and then it was ripped up by Jeremy Hunt. It's now going to last 6 months. So there is some support out there. Clearly, it's not enough. We do have a meeting from the Bank of England next week, Thursday. This is going to be after Jeremy Hunt spells out the fiscal plan to try and tighten up the budget. But, you know, even with the rise of interest rates, which is supposed to abate inflation, we're seeing over 900,000 people see their mortgages rise. People are really struggling at the moment, Will. And the thing is, I think it does sound like a hashtag first world problem, a kind of, oh, yeah, you know, that's Britain, whatever. No, it is really, really tough right now. And I know it's tough in most places around the world, but, you know, people are really struggling, particularly those on middle incomes who are just not seeing their wages go as far as they used to. Mortgage payments now, you know, people are starting to default on those mortgage payments, and there is nowhere for them to go. So to say this is a difficult in-tray, you know, is clearly an understatement, particularly as we are also already hearing that thousands of Conservative Party members across the country not sitting in Parliament are already cancelling their Tory membership because they still feel very, very bruised. Many people are not happy that Rishi Sunak is Prime Minister. So very turbulent times here in the UK at the moment.
I hope Rishi garners the support he needs right now, because the UK does need a united front to be able to go through what the situation that it's facing right now. And what are the markets, how are the markets reacting to this news? Is there anything we're seeing there?
Well, we had indications that they were happy because, of course, stability, accountability, transparency, that really is Rishi Sunak. You know, he's squeaky clean, filthy rich. That's kind of his thing. So yesterday we did see a rise in the pound, and we saw that the FTSE, the UK blue chip index, was positive. It's negative today, which is not great for him, and it's even shedded more losses as soon as he was anointed Prime Minister by King Charles III early morning. At intraday, the all-share is down 0.48%. The FTSE 100 down 2 at 0.63%. FTSE 250 is a domestic market, that's up slightly by 0.11%. In the currencies market, the British pound is currently trading up on the US dollar, which is good, by 0.45%. I think £1 will get you about $1.13. The British pound is trading up on the euro by 0.58% and also up on the Japanese yen by 0.39%, Will.
Thanks so much, Juliana. It now seems like it's a crime to be rich. Thanks so much for the details and the updates on what's happening in the UK. Thank you so much.
And happy.
After the break, commodities market update. Next, this is Business Incorporated. Welcome back. Now, rice is a widely consumed staple grain in Nigeria. Now, it constitutes 8% of the food basket for the Consumer Price Index and is also significantly consumed during Christmas and other festivities. Now, recently, the price of rice has increased from 35,000 naira to 48,000 naira in Nigeria. Yet to date, the price of rice has increased more than the rise in the rate of food inflation. Financial derivatives company analyst Victoria Momo joins me to discuss the implications of this spike. Good afternoon, Victoria. It's good to have you on the program.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me.
Now, Victoria, we've seen the flooding in Nigeria that has, exacerbated the food inflation in the country, especially for grains like rice. And we've also seen the dollar pressure, devaluation pressure also on that. And we're wondering how Nigerians are dealing with this spike in the price of rice, seeing that it is the major staple in the country.
Thank you for the question. Like you rightly said, rice is widely consumed as a daily meal, and especially during festive period. And of course, the demand for rice has constantly been on the rise. Christmas period, especially, is that period of is characterized by increased demand for rice, and either for personal consumption or as hampers for friends and families. And this has all contributed to the increase in price, for rice. And over the years, or over the last 5 years, between September and December respectively, the price of rice, increased by an average of 10%, due to the Christmas demand effect. However, we've recently, recorded a sharp increase in price of rice by, 41%. And this is majorly due to the flooding, like you said, which has submerged many farmlands and caused the food supply to remain tight, particularly rice. And this is also compounded by the flood in one of our major rice producers, which is Ebola in Nasarawa State, that has also been affected by the flooding. So this has caused the supply of rice to remain tight. And when there is tight supply, the price of rice will definitely increase. And sadly, this is coming at a time when there is a demand effect, Christmas demand effect. So when the price of rice actually rises, this would actually affect consumer demand for the rice. And considering the fact that there is lingering shortages, many people would resort to panic buying ahead of Christmas in order to hedge against the possible increase in the price of the commodity, and this would trigger the price of the commodity even further.
So we do know that the federal government, through its Anchor Borrowers Program, has invested heavily in the production of rice domestically in the country. We did even witness at the time a point in 2021 that the price of rice was 18,000 naira per bag. But right now, what is constraining the domestic production of rice in the country? What is actually hampering it and we're not seeing that traction, that scale that we're looking for?
First and foremost, the implementation of the Anchor Borrowing Program has been, a major issue even before the flood currently ravaging, the country now. The expectation of this program, have not been met due to, several inadequacies, poor implementation, as well as corruption. And, with the flood now put in place, many farmers will be battling with, finance constraints. And due to this finance constraints, it will further be, exacerbated by, this flood. And as a result, this would affect the domestic production, of rice. The fact that the harvest is severely affected, the farmers would actually, default in their loan payments, because right now most farmers actually got loans, to boost rice production through the Anchor Borrowing Program. And when this flood is actually, ravaging and hampering their harvest, it would be difficult for them to get this money to pay back their loans. We could even see that after the flood, most farmers might not be able to get back to their farmland, due to lack of finance, unavailability of seedlings in order to resume cultivation, and also expensive planting inputs that are needed for the production of rice. So in essence, domestic production of rice will continue to stay tight so long as the government have not done anything to boost rice production in order to meet, the rising demand for rice in the country.
The people always believe that rice, the price of rice or the price of commodities will always go down after the Christmas season. That's always seasonally, spiked or triggered if it rises. But seeing the situation that we are in with the flooding and all, do you think that this will be what we'll experience in 2023? Will there be a drop in the price of rice or an increase in the price of rice? And also considering the fact that we're entering an election year, how is that going to play out for Nigerians?
Normally, the price of rice should fall as the Christmas season ends due to a slight decrease in the demand for rice. However, it is unlikely that the price of rice goes down due to the lingering supply shortage that stems from the flood in regions across Nigeria. Also, the election year is fast approaching, and as part of the campaign strategy, foodstuffs will be distributed round to law voters, and this would increase the demand for rice. So if there is an increase in demand for rice, amid supply shortage, then the price of rice will continue to rise against the usual trend of a fall in price when the Christmas demand ends.
So it's more like the election is going to cause is it more pain or ease for rice buyers? Because I'm hearing that the demand because of electioneering is going to spike the price of rice. I don't think that looks good, Victoria, but thank you so much for sharing your thoughts on the program. Victoria Momo, analyst, Financial Derivatives Company, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So now, leading infrastructure solutions provider in Africa, that's Africa Finance Corporation, AFC, has successfully closed a $389 million dual currency samurai term loan facility. The transaction marks AFC's second foray into the Japanese capital markets. Now, this following an inaugural samurai loan facility in 2019, when the corporation raised $233 million and 1 billion Japanese yen. The three-year tenor facility is an important step as the AFC builds a coalition of investors to diversify its funding sources, and that's including more institutional capitals from Asia and existing partners in Europe and North America. Now, the United Nations is set to sign a new cooperation framework with Ghana to provide the country with $500 million. And that's the the United Nations Sustainable Development Cooperation Framework, which is scheduled to be signed today, which will be implemented over a period of 3 years. The instrument outlines the UN's development system's integrated contributions to the Sustainable Development Goals, along with the commitment to leave no one behind, to fundamental and a human rights-based approach to gender equality and women's empowerment, to building resilience and sustainability, and to strengthening accountability. Now, the European Union has allocated 119.6 million Kenyan shillings to help Kenya take anticipatory action against the spread of Ebola following its outbreak in Uganda. This EU funding will support the Kenya Red Cross Society in providing much-needed training and awareness-raising sessions to communities at risk, especially along the Uganda-Kenya border towns. This project will run for 3 months now. It's targeting over 565,000 people in Uganda-Kenya border towns and in towns with high socioeconomic interactions with Uganda, as well as along the transport route from Uganda to Kenya. There have been about, recently we've seen about 61 confirmed cases for the Ebola virus Sudan strain, with up to 25 confirmed deaths, including 4 health workers. The Congress of South African Trade Unions, COSATU, has gone back to its initial demand for a 10% wage increase from the government after salary talks collapsed. The union federation said in a statement, and that COSATU is having considered the economic outlook of government, their demands of a higher percentage above consumer price inflation. CPI is informed by the fact that the three main items, that's food, electricity, and public transport, which drives the expenditure patterns of its members, is way above the set CPI. Inflation for the month of September is 7.5%, and the government is offering a 3% increase. And that's it now on Business Incorporated. I'm Willie Bang. Thanks for watching. See you tomorrow.